Every July, my American neighbors do the same thing. They shut every window at sunrise, turn the thermostat down to 68, and sit inside a cold box until the power bill shows up. Last summer, one of them told me his bill was $412 for a single month. He asked me what I do instead, since my house sits 3 degrees cooler than his most afternoons, and I never once touch a thermostat. I told him the truth. I use water and sand and a piece of timing my grandmother taught me in Kyoto 60 years ago, and the whole setup cost me about $3 to start. He laughed at first, then he stopped laughing when I showed him the bucket. My name is Kenji Watanabe. I grew up in an old wooden machiya house in Kyoto, the kind with sliding paper doors and a narrow stone path along the side. And no machine in the world was cooling that house in August. My grandmother did not own an air conditioner until she was 70 years old. What she owned was a bucket, a wooden ladle called a hishaku, and a habit she never once skipped between June and September. Every morning before the sun cleared the roofline, and every evening after it dropped behind the hills, she walked that stone path and threw water across it. We called it uchimizu, water striking. I want to be honest with you before I go any further, because I have seen enough fake miracle videos to know you deserve better. This will not turn your house into a walk-in freezer. It will not replace your air conditioner on the worst heat wave of July. What it will do, if you build it the way I am about to show you, is pull real heat out of the air around your windows for hours at a time, using nothing but water and gravity, the same way it has worked in Japan for 400 years. And I failed at this myself the first summer I tried it in America, because I did it in the wrong order and on the wrong surface. And I want to save you that mistake. Stick with me, and I will walk you through exactly what I changed in the order I changed it, so your first summer with this works better than my first one did. Quick word before I go further. The old methods my family uses, there is more of it than fits in any one video. I gathered the whole of it into a book you can buy in our pinned comment below. The book is the long version. If you want it, it is there. I will not mention it again. Here is where I went wrong that first American summer. I bought a bag of water misters from the hardware store, the kind that clip onto a garden hose, and I sprayed my whole patio in the middle of the afternoon, at 2 o'clock, standing under a sun that felt like a stove eye. Within 4 minutes, the concrete was dry again, and the air felt exactly the same as before I started. I thought the method was broken. I thought maybe it only worked in Kyoto because of something in the air there. I was wrong about both. I had picked the wrong hour and the wrong surface. And those 2 mistakes alone can make this whole method do nothing at all. So before I show you the fix, I need you to understand why throwing water on hot concrete at high noon is close to useless, and why the same water, on the same ground, at the right hour, can drop the air around your window by real degrees for real hours. What changes between those 2 moments is not the water. It is timing, and it is what is underneath the water. And once you see why, you will never look at your own driveway the same way again. Your air conditioner does not remove heat from your house for free. It captures heat inside a gas, squeezes that gas until it turns into liquid, pushes the heat that squeezing created out to a coil sitting in your yard, and does that over and over, all day, every day, using a compressor that pulls more electricity than almost anything else you own. That is why the bill climbs the way it does. You are not cooling your house once. You are fighting the heat back out of it, minute by minute, all summer long. Evaporation works on a completely different rule, and it is one most people learned in school and forgot. When water turns from liquid into vapor, it does not vanish. It pulls heat out of whatever is around it to make that change happen. Real heat, measured heat, about 540 calories for every single gram of water that evaporates. That heat has to come from somewhere, and it comes from the air and the ground right next to the water. This is the same reason your skin feels cold when you step out of a shower, and the same reason a wet towel over your neck feels cooler than a dry one. You are not imagining it. You are feeling real heat leave. So why did my hardware store misting hose fail on the patio at 2 in the afternoon? Because at high noon, the sun is pouring more heat into that concrete every second than the evaporating water could ever pull back out. I was fighting a fire hose with a teaspoon. And because concrete is close to solid glass as far as water is concerned, the water sat on top for a few minutes and disappeared before it could do any real work. My grandmother never once did uchimizu at noon. She did it at dawn, before the sun climbed high enough to fight her, and again at dusk, after the worst of the heat had already left the sky. In both of those windows, the ground is already cooling on its own, and the water she poured got to do the last part of the job, instead of an impossible part of the job. Here is the counterintuitive part. The piece almost nobody tells you. The method is not really about cooling the air. It is about controlling two things most people never think about at all: timing and surface. Timing decides whether the water is helping the day cool down or fighting a war it cannot win. And surface decides whether that cooling lasts 4 minutes or 4 hours. A dry patch of ground gives the water nowhere to sit, but the top layer, gone in minutes. Same as my failed misting hose. A loose, open surface like sand or coarse gravel holds water down inside itself, in the gaps between the grains, and lets it evaporate slowly, hour after hour, instead of all at once. My grandmother's stone path had gaps packed with sand underneath the flat stones, for exactly this reason, whether she thought of it in scientific terms or not. Her family had simply noticed, generation after generation, that a stone path holding sand under it stayed cool longer than a path of solid poured concrete. That is the whole secret, hiding behind Uchimizu, and it is the piece almost every article about it leaves out. Water plus timing plus the right surface underneath. And now let me show you how to build all three around your own windows this weekend. This is not a trick someone invented last year to sell a product. Old Kyoto Machiya houses were built around this same idea long before anyone understood the science behind it. A narrow courtyard called a tsuboniwa sat in the middle of the house, open to the sky, holding soil and moss, and a small stone basin instead of concrete. A covered wooden porch called an ingawa ran along the outside, shaded, open on the sides, letting air move underneath the house instead of trapping it against a slab. None of it was decoration. Every piece of that house was doing the same job my grandmother's stone path was doing, holding a little water, staying shaded at the wrong hours, letting air pass through at the right ones. 400 years of Kyoto summers, with no electricity, taught people which materials held water and cooled slow, and which ones baked hard and cooled nothing. We are simply borrowing 400 years of trial and error and fitting it under one window instead of an entire house. You will need 4 things, and none of them cost much. A bag of coarse sand or pea gravel, about $3 at any hardware store. A bucket and something to pour with, a ladle, an old pitcher, whatever you have. A set of outdoor bamboo blinds, the kind sold as sudare, or exterior roll-up shades, usually $12 to $20, depending on the size of your window. And an old cotton bedsheet, you do not mind getting wet. That is the entire shopping list. Now let me walk you through what to do with them, in the order that actually matters. Start with what I call the drinking strip. Pick the 1 or 2 windows in your house that catch the worst afternoon heat, usually a window facing west or south. Clear a strip of ground beneath it, about 2 feet wide if you have the space, right up against the foundation. If it is bare dirt, good. If it is solid concrete, that is fine too. You are about to fix that problem. Pour your bag of sand or gravel down in a layer at least 2 inches deep along that strip. This is the part almost nobody adds, and it is the part that turns a 5-minute trick into a 5-hour one. That loose layer is going to hold the water you pour on it down inside itself instead of losing it all to the sun in the first few minutes. Next comes the timing, and this is where I failed the first time, so listen closely. Twice a day. Once within the first hour after sunrise and once in the last hour before sunset. Take your bucket and pour water across that sand strip until it is soaked through, not flooded, just soaked. This is Uchimitsu, water striking, and my grandmother did this every single day of summer for as long as I can remember. Do not do this at midday. I already told you why. The sun at noon will beat you every time. Morning and evening, the air is calmer, the ground is not fighting you, and the water actually gets to do its job, pulling real heat out of the air right next to your window for hours afterward instead of minutes. While that strip is doing its slow work outside, hang your sudare blinds on the outside of the same windows, not the inside. This one detail matters more than people realize. A blind hung inside your window stops light after it has already turned to heat on the glass. A blind hung outside stops the sun before it ever reaches the glass at all. My grandmother's house had these hanging on every south-facing window from May straight through September, rolled up and tied off in the morning, dropped back down before the sun got high. You are not blocking your view all day. You are blocking the 2 or 3 hours when the sun hits that window hardest and letting the light back in the rest of the day. Then comes what I call the night pull, and it costs nothing at all. In the early morning and late evening, the same hours you are watering your sand strip, open 2 windows on opposite sides of your house, one near your cooled strip and one on the far side, and let the air move straight through in a line. If you have a box fan, Set it in one window facing outward, which pulls air through the house instead of pushing it, and it will draw in that cooler, damp air sitting over your sand strip. Once the sun gets high, close everything back up, blinds down, windows shut, and you trap that cooler air inside instead of letting the afternoon heat walk right in the front door. This single habit, closing the house before it heats up instead of after, is the part most Americans never do, because most homes here are built to fight heat with machines instead of keep it out in the first place. Last, for the one room you are in the most, take that old cotton bedsheet, soak it through with water, and hang it across a doorway or an open window with a fan blowing directly through it. The fan pulls air through the wet cotton. The water pulls heat out of that air on its way through. Same rule as the sand strip, just faster and smaller, built for one room instead of a whole house. My grandmother did the same thing with a piece of hemp cloth over the doorway to the kitchen on the worst days of August. It will not turn your bedroom into a walk-in cooler, but paired with the sand strip and the sudare and the night pole, most people feel the difference within the first 2 or 3 days of doing all 4 together. I want to be straight with you about what this does and does not do, because I promised you honesty and not a miracle. This will not beat a 110-degree heat wave by itself. And if you live somewhere heavy, with humidity, thick Gulf Coast air, deep south summers, the water in that sand strip is going to evaporate slower and do less work, because the air is already holding all the moisture it can carry. I will not pretend otherwise. But in most of the country, on most ordinary summer days, $4 of sand, a sheet you already own, and 20 minutes of pouring water morning and night can take real degrees off the rooms you actually live in. And every degree you do not ask your air conditioner to fight is money staying in your pocket instead of leaving it. Families who run this system through a full summer in a hot, dry climate tell me they cut their AC running hours by 1/3, sometimes more. And on a bad summer with a maxed out unit running nearly non-stop, that difference across June, July, and August can add up to real hundreds of dollars, sometimes climbing into the thousands if your electricity rates are high and your unit is old. It is not a guarantee. It is what happens when you stop fighting heat with a machine every hour of the day and start keeping it out in the first place. My grandmother used to say something in Japanese that does not translate perfectly, but the closest I can get it in English is this: the house that breathes with the day stays cooler than the house that fights it. She did not mean anything mystical by it. She meant that a house built to open in the cool hours and close in the hot ones will always work with less effort than a house sealed up all day, running a machine at full strength against a heat that is going to win eventually anyway. That is the whole philosophy underneath everything I showed you today. Work with the hours you are given instead of against all 24 of them at once. Here is what I want you to do tonight. Not next week, tonight. Go to the hardware store before it closes. Buy 1 bag of coarse sand for about $3 and pour it in a strip under the window that gets the worst afternoon sun in your house. Tomorrow morning, before you leave for work, soak that strip with a bucket of water. Do it again tomorrow evening when you get home. That is the whole start. No blinds yet, no wet sheet yet, just the strip and the water, morning and night, for 3 days. Come back and tell me in the comments what your window felt like on day 3 compared to day 1. I read every comment, and I want to know how it worked in your climate, because dry Arizona heat and thick Georgia heat are not the same fight. And I learned something new every time someone tells me how it went where they live. One more honest thing before you go. This method cools the air moving through your rooms. It does not touch the heat building up in your attic all day long, and if your attic is running hot with no airflow, some of that heat is still going to press down through your ceiling, no matter how good your sand strip is doing its job downstairs. I am not covering attic heat today. That is a separate fight with its own fix. But do not judge this method against a hot upstairs bedroom on the worst day of July and call it broken. Judge it against the same room last summer, same hour, same weather, air conditioner off, and see what changes. Refresh the sand strip once a season, since rain and foot traffic will pack it down over a few months. And take your sudare blinds inside once the real cold arrives, so the sun and rain do not wear them out before next summer. Small upkeep, once or twice a year, for a system that otherwise runs on nothing but water you were already going to use anyway. Next time, I am going to show you what my grandmother hung in the kitchen doorway every August to keep the whole house smelling like rain, even when it had not rained in 3 weeks. Made from one plant most people rip out of their garden as a weed. It worked before anyone in her village had electricity, and it still works better than almost anything you can buy today.